So Lisa Myers is our speaker today, and she has been interacting with SFBBO for quite a long time. She used to be on our board, and she also chaired our annual fundraiser in the fall, which is called the California Fall Challenge. I think she, spent a lot of her time during the years she was on our board to help us raise money for those fundraisers. So we thank her very much. She's clearly been very dedicated to birds. She's also a businesswoman. She started her own tour business, Let's Go Birding, which is aimed at guiding bird tours for beginner birders to introduce people to the joy of birds. And now she is currently at her business, Los Gatos Bird Watchers. You can see all the bird seeds in her background, which is an awesome store for bird and animal and nature lovers in Los Gatos. So it's right in my town where I live, and I like to go there to get seeds for my bird feeders. Lisa has a bachelor's in public relations, which she uses to attract more people into birding, which we desperately love more people in the world be participating in birding activities. And she's also been an educator and taught adult education classes throughout the valley for Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society and also the Palo Alto Adult School. So today, Lisa is going to talk a little bit about how we can help birds at home. And she would be a really good expert on that because she sees all the birds locally, and she also supplies a lot of things for the birds locally, including seed. So I'm going to pass it on to you, Lisa, or you can take the screen control and go ahead and with your presentation. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is my first Zoom meeting, and I get to do my first Zoom meeting 3 months into a pandemic. So I'm glad you guys are all taking time out of your day. I want to thank Serena and Eway and the Mid-Peninsula Open Space for taking the time. Everybody's, really had to learn how to do business in a whole new way with everybody sheltering at home. And so thank everybody. I also want to thank all the photographers. I'm not a photographer, I'm just a birder. And so I got to use photographs from all of our customers and people that have helped us through the years. And so I'm really proud that I was able to put a presentation together, Birds in Our Own Backyard. So I thank all of you guys for your support. And I wanted to say a little bit about what we do here. Eway certainly explained to everybody who I am. Most of you know, well, many of you know me because I've been around for a couple of decades here. But it all started as a bird watching hobbyist, and my background is in communications public relations. And so I've had the opportunity to sit through all the talks that have happened, all the birdie hours, and you've heard from a lot of biologists and ornithologists and even some scientists. And I'm a communications major, and I wanted to take birding into the next level because birding can be incredibly intimidating, as some of you know. Latin and taxonomic order and fancy words and parts of the birds, it can be a little overwhelming. And so I wanted to make it easy for people, and I wanted them to have a good time, and I wouldn't want to lose them the first day they walk in the door. If they heard auricular patch, that might kind of freak them out, or heaven forbid you talk about Epidendix flycatchers. And so it was beginning birding, teaching around town, and then I had the opportunity to meet Freddie Howell, and she was the owner, she and John, of the Los Gatos Bird Watcher. And the Los Gatos Bird Watcher is celebrating 25 years, and we're at the Kings Court Center. And our focus is educating people about the birds in their backyard, making it fun. And we sell seed, bird feeders, bird baths, and then gift items. And so it's a unique environment for us to be in a shopping center when really a lot of what we do is almost that of a nonprofit. We spend a lot of time talking to people about birds. And the regular Joe that walks in the door, they see us and they have a question about a bird that's in their yard or at their place of business or in the parking lot or something that they've experienced. And we're right here on the home front. They come in and they ask us. And so that has, it keeps us very busy. And because we sell seed, we are also, we were considered essential. So we've had we've been open the entire time with limited hours and limited staff and face masks and bleach and all of that. And so it's been a challenge, but we're right in the middle of the spring breeding season, and there's a lot going on, and I'm very fortunate that we're here to help everybody. And so a lot of what we do at the store is, as I said, education, and I've had the chance to partner with, people like Ryan Phillips and Steve Shunk and Bill Walker and the National Crane Foundation, and we get people out to learn about the birds all through the year. We do Saturday morning bird walks. I miss all you guys. We haven't had our walks for a couple of months. And so there's always something going on. It keeps us very busy here. And we get to take people to Hawk Hill and Golden Gate Raptor Observatory, kids programs where they learn about owls and owl pellets. And we spent some time in Coyote Valley, and Brian Phillips was helping us identify our hawks. And we even did butterflies. When you're looking for butterflies, you also look for birds. And so it takes a village, and everybody on the call and all of these different organizations are trying to do the right thing. And so that's what we're about. Oh yes. And then there's the Birdaloo. Some of you already know about the Birdaloo. I'm probably one of the few tour guides that tows her own toilet. It's quite humbling. But when you take a bunch of people out in the middle of nowhere, like Pinocchio Valley and such, it's really nice to have a bathroom with you, a clean bathroom. So we pack it in and we pack it out. And before we go forward, I wanted to just touch on the whole subject about feeding birds at home. And it is kind of controversial for some people. They get confused about it. And when you're in a park, in an open space, a National Wildlife Refuge, you're not supposed to feed the wildlife. It's not good. You want to let them do their own thing. And so it's not encouraged, and you're not supposed to do it. But when you're in your own home and you're helping birds get through a season and you're in your backyard, it's okay to feed the birds. And we paved paradise. A lot of people cut down native plants, cut down trees, all the different food sources that our native birds have evolved to eat. And so we've changed everything. We've altered it in suburbia. And so if we can feed birds in the backyard and do some things for them, as Cornell says, we believe in the power of the birds to ignite discovery and inspire action. And we believe that also. So that's where I'm coming from. And today we're going to focus on the 5 following topics. And at the end, we're going to take questions. And so if things come up, just, keep that in mind, and then we'll go ahead and I'll answer them. So today's agenda: backyard bird feeding, attracting birds with nectar, everybody needs water, birds don't understand windows, and nesting is how we get more birds. Because we spend every day talking to customers about all of these topics. So backyard bird feeding, what's it all about? If by the way, there's a picture with no tag on it, it means I photographed it. And so I didn't have to give myself credit. These are a couple of lesser goldfinch at my thistle feeder in my backyard. The male there is giving me the stink eye. But backyard bird feeding, connecting people with birds. When people get to know a bird, it becomes real. People want to know more, and knowledge leads to doing the right thing. And as all of you know, every newspaper in the country has been posting articles about people now connecting with nature. People are home. They're noticing birds for the first time. I saw one lady write somewhere that while she was working from her home, she heard a bird singing outside of her window. And she said, "It's probably been singing outside my window every spring, and I was never here to hear it." And so she was really touched that she got to finally meet a bird she'd never seen before. And people are coming in here every day, and they're saying the same thing. I want to learn more about this because I'm at home. I want to teach my children or whatever. And so that's what it's all about. So I thought I would kind of talk about what happens when a customer comes in, and how we get to help birds on the home front is the customer comes in confused. They have a question, and we get to segue it to education. They get to learn something they didn't even know about. And so this comes up a lot. Love this bird, hangs out in my yard. What kind of seed does it need? And they'll show us a picture on their phone that they photographed the bird, and we'll say, well, you know what? That's a flycatcher. It's a black phoebe. That bird doesn't eat seed. You can't really, put seed out for it, but you know what you can do is not use pesticides. And they'll look at you like, well, what do you mean? Well, if you use pesticides, you remove the food source. And so we got to just nicely dabble that in there, and they sometimes don't even know they learned something when they walk back out the store. Or we sell them mealworms. We do sell live mealworms, and Phoebes love live mealworms. Or this one comes up. I have these brown birds. They're always in our yard. We often see two. What can we do for them? So we'll explain to them it's probably a California towhee, and we get to pull out some field guides to show them. And we tell them you can offer them seed, but you know the best thing you could also do is keep your cats indoors. We probably talk about outdoor cats and feral cats every single day in the store. And the staff, we all love cats. We have cats, but we've learned to keep them inside. So we get to talk about cats, and it's a tough subject. And we don't want to pick fights because these are our customers, but we do want them to go away and remember that it does make a difference. And so when we get to talk about cats, we bring up things like Birds Be Safe cat collars. Some people say, I don't want my cat wearing this collar. Other people say, I'm going to try it. I'll do whatever I can. I can't keep my cat inside. So we sell these collars to try to make a difference. We educate people on cat bells. Cat collars with bells don't always work. The Santa Cruz Animal Shelter through the years has had these great catio open houses. And so people learn how to make an outdoor screened area safe for your cat and the birds. Because if you keep your cat indoors, it's good for the birds, it's also good for the cats. So this subject goes on every day. And as a business owner, if you tell me you're feeding birds and you also have lots of cats, I will tell you to quit feeding the birds because you don't need to chum in your backyard. So I'll just encourage them to quit feeding the birds. And that's the way we do it here. Other topics that come up, they'll say like, you know, what's this bird coming to my feeder? I can't find this in a field guide. You know, this is new. I didn't see it all winter. And that's just, you know, nothing like an open up that can of worms. We get to talk about the brown-headed cowbirds. And so when people are looking at birds in their yard and they see this whole situation, at least it's a bird that's named after its field marks. The male there, the brown-headed cowbird, quite actually a handsome bird. The female looks just like him, except, you know, she shares the same body shape, but she's muted. And the cowbirds, they go off and they lay their eggs in other birds' nests. They're called a parasitic species. And so customers get really confused when they look out the window and they see something like this dark-eyed junco down here on the left feeding not one, but two brown-headed cowbird babies. And so this oftentimes gets the attention of customers when they can't figure out what's going on in their yard. And then they're fascinated that this type of thing goes on out in nature. Then, of course, we get to talk about predators. And this is all centered around, you know, feeding birds in the backyard. And everybody's got a hawk that comes to their yard. It's usually a Cooper's hawk. Or we get to have the conversation about Cooper's hawk versus sharp-shinned hawks. But, you know, hawks need to eat too. And Cooper's hawks, the accipiters and sharp-shins, they eat other birds. And that's always a tough one for people to understand, birds eating birds. And so when you feed birds in your backyard, you oftentimes end up with a hawk coming into your backyard. And young hawks have a real high mortality rate because they have to learn how to feed themselves. And so believe it or not, when you have backyard bird feeders, you're actually helping hawk species learn how to hunt and survive. So you are also indirectly feeding another type of bird in the backyard. And then the red-tailed hawk there in the middle, we usually don't get red-tailed hawks in our backyard, but Ron took all these pictures and he obviously had one on a nearby roof. The red-tailed hawks are one of the most common hawks we have here in the valley, and they spend more time going after squirrels, rabbits, ground squirrel, rodents, that type of thing. But everybody loves hawks. And so that also helps us segue into rodenticide. People come in all the time and say, I heard an owl in my yard. I don't know what it is. So we'll play owl calls, and then we'll figure out it's probably the great horned owl, the hoot owl. And they'll say, can I get a nest box for it? I'd like to keep it in my yard. So then we get to explain that great horned owls don't use nest boxes. In fact, they nest in trees. And then they'll say, well, what can I do to help the owl? You say, well, you don't use rodenticides. And then they say, what are rodenticides? And so most of you on this call probably know all of this stuff, but it's amazing how our community, they don't teach it in school. They don't talk about it on the golf course. I don't quite get it, but we're constantly having to educate people about these things. So we explain to them about rodenticide, and hopefully they'll take it home and they'll tell a neighbor who will tell a neighbor. And then some people get barn owls. That's the other owl that we can have, along with western screech owls. And so people that want to put nest boxes in their yard for the owls, I've provided 2 links here. You know, our own local Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society has a fantastic nesting information, how to make nest boxes. There's several very active volunteers and organizers of that, a part of our local Audubon Society, and they've provided lots of great information if you know somebody who can make a box. And then also the Barn Owl Box Company, they've got good information too. There's resources out there. Then, when you're feeding in the backyard, you've always got the people coming in. You know, a lot of people that feed birds, they don't know what they are. They love their birds, but they don't know what they are. And they'll come in and they'll say, there's this new bird at my feeder. It's taking over everything. What do I do? I don't even know what it is. And so then we get to tell them it's probably a pine siskin. And pine siskins, they're eruptive, they're nomadic. We don't know when they're going to show up here in the Bay Area. Some winters we don't get them at all, and other winters they're here in great numbers. And they share the same feeders with the goldfinch, the lesser goldfinch and the American goldfinch. And so the lesser goldfinch, or excuse me, the pine siskins come along, people get to learn about them, they get to talk about all the different field marks of goldfinch and try to tell them apart. But then we then have to take it to the next level of education, and it's about keeping your feeders clean. Because when you get a bunch of pine siskins at your feeder, they're very known to carry illnesses that they can pass on to other birds. And that's obviously a bad thing. It's like all of us wearing masks right now because of COVID, where we're all trying not to make anybody else sick. And so same thing, we're supposed to wash our hands and everything. Same thing happens with your feeders. You're supposed to keep them clean. And so we actually have a feeder cleaning service here at the store. We clean a lot of feeders every week. And keep it clean for people. I know it's a service people very much appreciate it, and it's our way to help our customers do the right thing. Freddie and John started this a long time ago, and people love it. And if you want to clean your own feeders at home, vinegar also works. We use special feeder cleaning chemicals here. It's not chemicals. It's a product that really helps get them all clean, but you can also use vinegar. Some people use a little tiny bit of bleach. It just depends what you believe in. But that's always important to do so that you keep your feeders and your environment healthy for everybody. And then there's wonderful things like teaching the kids. You know, we always talk about birding as something that older people do. And I think that's just, you retire and you finally have time to notice what's going on outside. And so when you can get the kids into it and the younger people into it, it's exciting, and they get excited. And at West Valley College, they've got a program there where the kids are actually, they put up this feeding station. We help them get it set up. You can see 4 different feeders there. And the kids are monitoring. They're looking to see what birds are coming to the feeders, what seed preference that they have, what species are there at what time. They're contributing their data to Cornell, and they're just doing this entire study, which is really, they're having a great time. And there's actually 3 classes coming up, depending on the shelter-in-place status. And so if anybody was interested or knew somebody that wanted to get involved in the classes, the contact is even there for you, for Leticia Gallardo, and she'd be more than happy to answer any questions. And then we had another biologist. She was a biology major, but she was working at Kaiser. And she came in and was recognizing how backyard feeding and bringing the birds in and letting people get to know them brought joy to a day. And so she works at Kaiser. And so she asked us to help her get set up with a bird feeder so that the people inside the hospital could look out the window and see some birds. And she was really excited about it. And we were too. We were happy to help her do that. And so we have to talk about this topic. So looking at those two setups, the one at West Valley College and the one at Kaiser, we helped both of these groups come up with feeders that would minimize any rodents attacking them. Many people, you know, that's a big issue. We probably talk more about tree squirrels in this store than we do about birds. And so there really is a way to tweak it to keep the squirrels off. Rats can be a problem. And so baffles from above, baffles from below, hung far enough away from the trunk that the squirrel can't jump. There's a clip right now that's going rampant on YouTube, a scientist that's trying to come up with a squirrel-proof feeder. It's hilarious. They are fun to watch. The 4 feeders that West Valley College is using are squirrel buster feeders. The squirrels, if they get on there, they automatically close shut because of the weight of the squirrel. So there is a way to work it so that you minimize that. And some people even take their feeders in at night if they're having any kind of a problem with rodents. So there's a way to finally tweak it. You just have to be patient. And if you want to avoid seed altogether, it's just too much, another way you can do it is through suet. Suet is natural. We think of it very much in the East where they have snow through the winter. Suet's high fat, high protein. The birds eat it to be able to get all that fat and protein, especially in the winter. But we can sell it here during all year in California. Birds eat it in the winter because they do want it for the same reasons that they would eat it in the East. And then they also like it in the spring when they're feeding young, because it's an easy way to feed young. And as you can see here from the picture, that's an adult dark-eyed junco feeding a young junco. And it comes in lots of different flavors, including hot pepper. And if you get the hot pepper flavor, the birds don't have a developed sense of taste, so they can't taste it, but rodents can. So rodents leave it alone. And so it's a way to make it be a win-win. Another way to offer suet is in something like this feeder. This feeder is quite it's a new one on the market actually. It keeps the squirrels out because of weight activated, but that the birds can hold on to the outside and then go in and grab the suet. And so it just makes it an easy way to offer food, watch birds in your yard, and you don't have to deal with the mess of the feeder if you just don't want to go there, you don't have the time, or don't want to clean, whatever. It's another option. And then this time of year, these 2 pictures are just in my own yard. That's a mama Buick's wren or a dad, don't know which one, feeding young. The young are in a nest box at my neighbor's. And the chestnut-back chickadee is grabbing some suet and some dried mealworms, and it's off feeding nestlings. And you know they're feeding young because they come and they just go, and they come and they grab and they go, and they come and they grab. They're just ferocious on feeding and feeding and feeding. And so that's fun way to watch birds in your yard. So enough of all the seed and the feeding. We move to the next topic, attracting birds with nectar. And you know, hummingbirds, we kind of take them for granted. They're not found outside of the Americas. And so when people come here from other countries, like, you know, China and Japan and England and Australia, and they're just so excited to see hummingbirds. They want to know more about them. And so some people, that's what they totally do. They do hummingbird feeding. And we get the Annis hummingbird all year long here in California. People always ask, when do they leave and when do they come back? And we know we have them all year long. If you were closer to the equator, you see a lot more. There's over 300 species of hummingbirds. But this is the one we get. And the nectar formula, 1 part sugar to 4 parts water. Don't use red food coloring, and change often depending on the heat. We have people come in every day and say, there's no hummingbirds coming to my feeder. I don't know why. And we'll say, well, when did you change the sugar water? And they'll say, well, it's full. I haven't changed it in a couple of weeks. And we'll say, well, that's why you don't have any hummingbirds. The sugar water goes bad, and the hummingbirds won't eat it. So you do have to remember to keep your sugar water fresh. You can make a bunch up and put it in the refrigerator. And every time you change your sugar water, you have to clean the mildew. It's sugar water. It grows bacteria. So you have to clean your feeder and keep everything clean. Male Anna's hummingbirds have the beautiful red coloring around the head, and the female is more plain. And people come in all the time. I have a hummingbird that won't let anyone else to the feeder. What can I do? What do I do about him? How do I get rid of him? What do I do about this bird? And so we just explain that's just the way they're wired. Hummingbirds, I say testosterone is testosterone. It doesn't matter how little you are. Hummingbird males defend territory, and they just make it hard for other birds to come in. And so if you want to put up a second feeder, we tell you to put it someplace far enough away that the male can't defend them all. Now, if you live in the Santa Cruz Mountains, or if you lived in Ecuador or Costa Rica, that's not going to be the case. You'll have more than one hummingbird at your feeder. But here in our normal backyards, here in the Bay Area, it's oftentimes one male to a feeder. Sometimes you can get a couple of females when the males aren't around. And, you know, this comes up too. We're here at the shopping center here at the King's Court, and we share this complex with a CVS pharmacy. And 3 times the poor people, the workers, come run into the store and say, we have a hummingbird in the store, can you help us? And many of you have called and also asked, I've got a hummingbird in my garage, I've got a hummingbird in the house. What can we do to get it out? What can we do to help? And so each time, one of my staffers goes down to CVS, and we stand inside the store with the hummingbird feeder. And we just stand there while we watch the hummingbird. It's always been a female, zip around CVS. And I have to tell you, it is impressive. She scoots around and misses all the things hanging off the ceiling, and CVS logo colors are red, and there's a ton of red in the store, and I'm guessing she just gets attracted to the red. And what eventually happens, she spins around and flies and flies and flies, and finally gets tired, and she lands on our offered hummingbird feeder and the nectar, and she just starts drinking, and we very carefully walk her out the store. And so you can do the same thing at your own house if that happens, because they're so attracted to red. So we've had a happy ending every time. And then nests, hummingbird nests. These are 2 babies about to fledge. They're made out of tiny, tiny spider webs. And so when people start asking about, you know, what do hummingbirds do? How do they, you know, nest, and how do they breed, and what do we look for? We get to tell everybody they're nesting now. You know, they'll start in December, and they'll do 2 clutches through the spring. So we get to tell everybody to remember to look before you prune, because they're so tiny. You got to watch before you bring out the shears and start trimming your shrubs. And then the other nectar-loving bird out there are the orioles. And we have a lot of people that wait for their orioles to show up every March. And then the orioles are here, and they leave usually by the end of August, and they too love nectar. And so we get the hooded orioles here in the Bay Area. We also get Bullock's orioles, but we don't see them coming to people's backyards. And they also like berry, whether it's grape jelly or berry jelly. You can put that in your feeder, and here you see an adult female feeding a fledgling, and then the male, and they nest in the fan palms. And so those fan palms that look dead, hanging down below the green palms, are actually the area where these birds nest. So it's not just a waste of dead tree, that's actually nesting habitat. So it's really great if you can leave that on the tree. And they're expanding their territory because we keep planting more palms. And they're here now, very shy bird, lovely bird to have in your yard. So now we've gone through the nectar feeders, feeding birds in the backyard, and some of you say, I can't do any feeding. What can I do to help the birds? So we say, keep it simple. Just put out water. Every bird needs to drink, and every bird loves to bathe. Birds really love to have clean feathers. It's kind of important for them in order to stay warm and cool. So I love this picture. We have 2 woodpeckers that are facing off with each other in a drinking fountain. And so birds are attracted to water. Many of you have experienced this when you're in your backyard. So birds come down, they want to get a drink. Running water is a magnet for attracting birds. Not everybody has an opportunity to plug in a pump, but if you do, you'll just get to see them come in. And these are all birds taken right here, these photographs in the Bay Area. And then some of you have told us that your homeowners association doesn't allow you to feed birds. So if you put out a bird bath, who cares, you know? You still get to see some great birds. You might, you know, see birds that wouldn't normally even come to seed, shy birds. And so it's a great option. You just need to keep it clean and keep the water fresh. And it doesn't even have to be fancy. This is a dog bowl at a local park, and the fledgling bluebirds took advantage of the water. And then we have people coming in all the time. I had a beautiful bird, yellow bird at my bird bath. What could it have been? What could it be? They don't know. They don't have field guides yet. They don't have cheat sheets, and they're just asking for help. So we get to pull out a field guide, and we get to show them. And it's very exciting for them. All of a sudden they see it, they match it, they see the range map, they learn about it, and, you know, hopefully they go home with the field guide, because we want them to increase their knowledge. And then the other thing that happens all the time, unfortunately, you know, windows. Birds don't understand windows. And so people are constantly coming in and asking us what they can do. What can we do about the windows, especially here in the South Bay and the Los Gatos Mountains and the Santa Cruz Mountains. People build beautiful homes with beautiful big panoramic windows, and I wish the architects could explain to people, you know, what could possibly happen when you put in windows. You know, there's a way to make it less vulnerable to birds. And so I provided another link, the Fatal Light Awareness Program. They're working so hard with different countries to try to help minimize the way they build buildings, to make windows easier for the birds to see. And when a bird hits the window and hits the ground, oftentimes it's going to be okay. It just needs time to recover. So we tell people to pick it up. It's okay to pick it up, put it in a box, let it calm down, let it recuperate, and then you'll find oftentimes 15, 20, 30 minutes later, it'll fly away and everything's okay, hopefully. And then from small to big, there's a company, we sell this tape here in the store. It's not as pretty to look at, but the philosophy is if you put the tape up vertically every few inches, the birds know they see the tape and they can't fly through it. It reminds them of spider webbing, and so they avoid it. And in some of these buildings that have been built, in Canada especially, and big cities, they're covering the entire building with products like this to minimize the birds striking. It's a really big deal. And our own Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, they have a whole section on their website for bird safe buildings, and they've worked with the city of San Jose to try to do the right thing when it comes to buildings. And everybody can do the right thing. There's no reason not to. The technology is there. And you can see some examples here. Both of these buildings have the tape, the vertical tape going up to try to minimize the strikes. And then we sell a lot of window alerts. They're hard for people to see, but the birds can see it. And some people say maybe it's not going to work. I don't know if it works, but we're just doing the best we can to try to make it work. Some people just tape Mylar ribbon to the outside of their windows, anything to let the birds see that there's an obstruction there and not to go that way. Grant you, a bird that's panicked is going to just try to get away from danger and sometimes hits the window. And now, ending here with the breeding season, it is the breeding season. And probably most of you on this call know that, but I cannot tell you how many people don't. They come in the store and they just have no idea. And so they ask questions and we explain, and then they go, oh, I had no idea. So the theory is, you know, one customer at a time, one conversation at a time. That's what we do. That's just how you get up in the morning and you hope it's gonna pass on. So at the breeding season, we get to talk to people about cavity nesting, non-cavity nesters, and hormones. Because, you know, what can I say? And what is this bird keeping me up all night? We hear this all the time. What is it? Well, it's a northern mockingbird, and it's the breeding season. When's it going to shut up? when he gets a girlfriend. Feel for him. I'm sure you can relate. And be happy you can hear him. You know, there's a lot of people that get to a point they don't get to hear the birds anymore, and they would give anything to be able to hear a bird. So if he wakes you up, just lie there and just count your blessings. That's what I say. Northern mockingbird. They're in every neighborhood. The other thing that comes up is I've got a bird banging against my window. Why? So, same thing. That's usually a male. Towhees do it more than anything. I had some bush tits doing it at our house this last spring. And it's the male defending territory. So he's looking in the window, he's looking in the mirror, and he thinks that's another bird. And so he's trying to tell that other bird to go away. And people say it's kind of stupid. Well, you got to understand, these birds have been around a lot longer than mirrors and windows, and they just haven't quite figured it out. So you can put something up to cover their view, and they maybe won't see it anymore, and then they'll move on. Or, you know, give it a few weeks. I promise, it's not forever. It'll end. And then I love robins in my yard. What kind of nest box should I get? So then we get to talk about, well, some birds don't use nest boxes. And so robins, they make their own good old-fashioned nests up in trees using twigs and leaves, and they eat a lot of bugs. And so we remind people about pesticides, and they love worms in the yard, so keep your cats inside. And we just get to segue into, again, those other educational aspects. And then I found a nest in my vegetable patch. How long till they leave? And this came up recently when a woman came in the store and she wanted to pull out her vegetables and plant a new batch, and she found this nest. She was totally shocked. Well, we figured out it was a junco. Juncos often nest on the ground. Well, why would they nest on the ground? Well, they've been nesting on the ground a lot longer than we've been here. They evolved the nest before dogs and cats and cement and parking lots, and so your vegetable garden provided that. She goes, well, how long until it leaves? So we figured it out. They were probably going to fledge in about 8 days. You know, it wasn't 8 months. It was 8 days. And she got excited. And she had her 2 sons with her. And she looked at her one son and she said, how about we turn this into a project for school? You need to write a science paper. And so she says, what can I do to make sure this nest is successful? So she learned something. Hopefully the babies made it well, you know, through. And the boys got a science paper to write. And then I have a woodpecker banging on my house. Oh my goodness, we hear that all the time too. And so we do try to figure out which woodpecker it is. You know, oftentimes it's acorn woodpeckers. Nettles woodpeckers are more common in our homes down below. Acorns always like to be around oak trees, and then the bigger woodpeckers are up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So we help them figure out what the woodpecker is. And, you know, it's a little tough if it's banging on the house. You might have termites. You might have cut down a dead and dying tree recently. So we get to have the whole conversation about leaving a snag on the property. Dead and dying trees are really important to nature. And so we talk about that. If they live in the mountains, can they top it maybe so that the tree won't fall down on your house, but you leave the bottom snag, you know, for the birds to use. So we have that conversation a lot. We want people to like woodpeckers, not, you know, try to get rid of them. And then I have western bluebirds for the first time in my yard. And I have to say, this comes up now every day. People are tickled that they're getting western bluebirds. And we sell bird boxes. People put them up. They have their own. They make their own. And I have to say, Mike Azevedo, Lee Pauser are just 2 names that come to mind with the bluebird box program. I think Lee shared in a program here that he was monitoring over 400 bird houses, and he'd seen over 18,000 bluebirds fledge in the time he was a volunteer. And so all that hard work is paying off, and we get to have bluebirds now. We even have them here in the parking lot at the bird store. And so people get really excited, and then they buy a box, and it gives more nesting opportunity. And we just had a lady send these pictures to the other day. She wanted to get the ID. She loved her birds. She knew she had the birds, but she didn't know what they were. And so the picture on the left was the nest with the babies in there. Mom and Dad were feeding feverishly. And then the next picture was the day before they fledged, and it was chestnut-backed chickadees. And they all made it successfully. There were 6 of them. And it was a great experience. And she'll clean out the nest box, make sure everything's okay, and it'll be ready for the next clutch. And then I got a call one spring. A lady called the store and she said, we can hear birds in our chimney. Who do we call? They were scaring her daughter. They wanted to get them out of there. And I got incredibly excited. I grabbed all of my information on swifts. I went to her house and I asked her 12-year-old daughter to go out in the front yard with me. And I said, let's see what comes out of this chimney. I can hear it in there with you. And sure enough, in a few minutes, we could see an adult fly out of the chimney, and then we could see an adult fly back into the chimney. And I said, you've got Vox's swifts in there. That is so awesome. And so then she realized there was nothing to be afraid of. This is not her house, I have to say. I grabbed this off the internet. But they turned it into an exciting adventure. They realized this bird had come all the way up from Central America. Their chimney was offering it a place to nest. She ended up inviting the neighbors to see the whole thing, and it became a win-win for the birds, for the 12-year-old, and for the family. And as I wrap it up, you know, every day we get a call, and we couldn't do it without so many groups. We are the middleman for so many organizations, volunteers out there, and we want to make sure everybody knows who these people are. Just today, a lady called, and she said, my cat got a bird, where can I take it? And last year we had a lady call. They're going to tent my condo complex, and I've got juncos nesting on the porch. And a lady called the other day. My husband just pulled wren off our fly tape. And we got a call the other day. My gardener just cut down a branch. And it's one of the hardest parts of owning this store. And we just hope with every phone call, the birds are going to make it and people learn for next time so it doesn't happen again. So these important links, and I thank everybody that's involved in those groups, because without you, it would be a disaster. You're needed so much in this valley. And I probably haven't even named everybody. These are the main groups we go to on a daily basis. And so I want to thank you guys. The birds thank you. I thought I'd end with this cute little Buick's wren. It's one of the sweetest little birds we have here in suburbia. And I know that was a lot of information. I could have, you know, I talked as fast as I could, and I hope you learned something new. And if you want to ask any questions, I'm here.
So our first question is, in the beginning you talked about how you shouldn't really feed birds in places like wildlife refuges and things like that, but it's good to do that in your backyard. So Siska asked, what if your backyard is a native backyard?
Well, that's a good point. If you've already got a native backyard, that means you're already doing a lot of the right things for the birds. And so if you're providing the seeds and the plants that they like, you know, maybe you don't need to worry about anything else. But if it's your own backyard and you want to add to it, if you add some seed or some suet or some thistle, you'll just bring in even some more birds, because you're providing a food source for them. If you put in, you know, adding that will just add to the wildlife, the bird life.
PM asked, how do you keep other people's cats out of your yard?
You know, I wish an inventor would come into the store and listen to the problems we have all day long, and somebody could invent something. We did a whole questionnaire of my customer base a year ago, and I asked them all, what do they do to keep the neighbors' cats out of their yard? And I wrote all their answers in the following newsletter. And, you know, going to the neighbor and asking them to keep their cats inside is one. Spraying the cats with water. Some people put those scarecrows, and so if the cat walks near the feeder, the water goes off and it just scares the cat away. Some people say I just always let my dogs out. In our particular yard, we had a feral cat situation, and so we put low garden fencing around the shrubs so that the birds couldn't hide, the cats couldn't hide in the shrubs and jump out and get the birds. And so we had we and everybody has different ways of doing things. You can even put rose clippings down underneath your feeders, because the cats won't want to step on the thorny, you know, branches. And so there's different ways to do it. I wish that, you know, you're not allowed to let your dog run into somebody else's yard. I don't know why you're allowed to let your cat run into somebody else's yard. I really wish someday the rules will change. It would be healthier for cats, and of course it would save millions of birds.
Absolutely. Iwe asked, how do you feel about barn cats that people use for mousing at horse barns and other farms?
I haven't seen the research on that. You know, if they're really at the barn and they stay at the barn and they take care of all of that, you know, I don't know the data on it. How many birds do they also get? Too bad the barns just don't have barn owls or great horned owls, because owls consume a tremendous amount of rodents. If you had an active barn owls, or, you know, in your area, holy cow, they would take care of a lot more rodents than a big old fat barn cat. So.
Greta asked, how often should we clean our feeders?
So your bird feeders, the seed feeders, you know, you could probably go every couple of weeks. If it's raining and your seed gets wet, you never want the seed to be able to sit there and get moldy and get stuck and cakey. You don't want that. You never put dry seed over wet seed. You want to, you know, work on that. You put enough seed in on a rainy day that they'll eat it before the day's out, and then you can put new seed in the next day. But if it gets yucky and mildewy, you have to clean it more often. Here in California, where we don't get any rain, you could probably go, you know, several weeks without having to clean it because it's dry seed. And if you don't notice any birds that appear sick, then you're doing a good job. When it comes to your hummingbird feeders, though, you really need to make sure you wipe off any of the black mold every time you refill it. Just keep it clean, keep a toothbrush near the sink, scrub it up before you refill it with sugar water.
And related to cleaning feeders, Judy asked, what would the ratio be for vinegar to water?
You know, I don't know exactly. It's everywhere out there. Vinegar is not that big of a deal. It's not going to hurt the birds as much. Bleach is a big deal. It's just a tiny little bit of bleach. So vinegar, you know, just scrubbing up with vinegar and then rinsing it out. You just want to make sure you rinse it all out and you dry it before you put sugar water back in. And so vinegar is not as harmful.
Florence says, I have nesting brewer's blackbirds who are feeding young now. They often catch a bug, bring it to my bird bath, and dip the insect in the water. Then they take it to the nest. What's that all about?
They're just cleaning the bug off. People usually, oh, you know, I didn't even talk about crows. Holy cow, we talk about crows all day long. Crows will take body parts to bird baths and clean them off and leave body parts in the bird baths. And we get complaints on that all the time. I think, you know, sometimes the birds are pulling off the wings, or they're pulling off, you know, ectoskeletons and that kind of thing. And so they just slap it around in the water. Maybe they're trying to drown it before they feed it to the youngins. I don't know specifically, but often they'll clean. You'll see birds killing the worms, like the mealworms. They'll be pounding they'll kill it before they fly away with it. Let's just put it that way.
Related to dipping food in water, Hecker Fam says crows love to come and drop walnuts or jack in the box in our bath. I think it's to soften it. Am I correct?
It could be. You know, they can eat a walnut. You know, they'll drop them in the road and have the cars run over them, and then go get the meat. Here we have a shopping center in this complex, and one time the lady that lived behind the shopping center came into our store and said that the crows and the ravens were raiding the shopping center's garbage, and she was finding prawns and chicken wings and sushi and everything in her bird bath. So these birds were flying over the fence and cleaning off everything in her bird bath. So obviously it's just something they like to do. They don't always. You'll see crows eating roadkill right off the street, and they don't take it anywhere to wash it, for crying out loud. But it's just, I guess it depends on if they have the water available to them and if they think they need to rinse it off before they eat it or feed it to their young.
Iway asked if you also clean hummingbird feeders at your store?
You know, sometimes people bring them in. Sure, we're willing to do that.
Okay, let me find the next question now. Hecker Fam asked if hummingbirds fly soon after hatching.
They do. No, they have to grow up in the nest. They hatch, and it's probably about 12 to 14 days before they fly. The picture I showed, those two babies were just about to fly. But as soon as they leave, man, they're gone. People tell us 1 minute the babies were in the nest, and then the next minute they were gone. And so they can fly immediately, and they oftentimes disappear. We don't even get to see where they are in our yards.
Anne says she never sees birds in her bird bath. Do you have any advice for her?
Sometimes it depends on the location of the bird bath. You know, when birds are bathing, it's very vulnerable because they're kind of looking, they're taking a bath, they're not looking around. And so if people have bird baths right out in the middle of their yard or too exposed, that can be kind of scary for birds. So if you were to move the bird bath to an area where there might be a hedge or a shrub, and they know that they could flee danger immediately if they had to, that helps. They also could be bathing, I know, at sunrise and sunset. When I get up really early in the morning, I find a lot of birds. The hermit thrush will be bathing, the fox sparrow bathes. Some birds do it before the sun comes up, right at the twilight, and they probably feel that's a safer time to bathe because, again, when they're not looking around and they're bathing, that's when they can get picked off by a predator. So when you may want to move it depending on where you have it, and we often say if somebody is not using the nest box you put out, or they're not using the bird bath, move it. Or make sure it's not too deep. Sometimes bird baths are beautiful, but they're too deep. And if they're too deep, the little birds can't touch the bottom, so they're not going to use it. Or if it's made out of glass and it's slippery, if the bird can't feel the ground, that's, again, they can't, it's slippery. They can't hold on while they're bathing. So it might be what the bird bath is made out of.
Hacker Fan says, I used to only have to fill the bird bath once a day, but now I have to twice a day. Is it worth it?
Yeah. We say, yeah, it's 90 degrees out. You might have to fill it more than that, you know, because it's hot. And so, right, anything it's worth it, if it's worth it to you. If you want to have it there for the birds and they're using it, when it's not so hot, it won't be so bad. Especially if there's less and less water and the creeks run dry and we're not allowed to water our yards, depending on what happens. A bird bath is the offering of water that the birds need. So we think it's worth it.
All right. PM says, I have 2 Bewick's wren nests. When can I clean them? I read that they could reuse them.
Mm-hmm. So when you know that the nest is empty, when you know that the babies are gone, in fact, some people are concerned that there's babies in the nest and they haven't heard anything. And we'll tell them it's okay to look in the nest box, just be careful. Then they look in the nest box and they say, wow, they're gone. They fledged. We missed it. I don't know when they left. And so if you know that everything's done and everything's over, you're more than welcome to go and clean out the nest, make sure there's no parasites, any mites or anything, and then put it back, and then it's ready to use the next time. And then the new mother, the new pair will bring in nesting material and create their own new nest the next time.
The Rogers family asks, can multiple types of feed be on the same pole or should they be separated?
Sometimes you don't want to put the hummingbird feeders near the seed feeders because the hummingbirds don't want to come zooming in at, you know, top speed when a slower, chunkier bird's flying in. So we suggest you kind of put the hummingbird feeders separate from the seed feeders. But a lot of people create a feeding station, and just like West Valley did, and they'll put several different feeders on one pole. You know, so that's okay to do, especially depending if you have limited space. And then you can just see what happens. It also sometimes restricts the kick out. If the seed has no shell on it, it doesn't sprout and it doesn't, create a mess. And so depending on where you set it up. So it's okay to put multiple feeders on the same area, and then the different birds will come in.
And related to that, Sally asked if I can put hummingbird feeders next to suet feeders, or if birds prefer a distance between them.
Like I was saying, I think you should keep the hummingbird feeders a little bit farther away. It just, they're coming in, they're going out, they're coming in, they're going out, and they don't need anybody in their way.
All right. Pranjal says, how would you feed birds in forests, like natural places, maybe for experiments like Panama fruit feeder?
Hi, Pranjal. Good question. Whenever I'm in a forest situation, nobody's feeding anything. Well, unless you're in Costa Rica or Belize or Panama. I don't know if I could, of course, you little smarty, you'd ask me that. I I don't know. It depends on where you are and how you could put it out. In a forest situation, I'm thinking you're in Puerto Rico, for crying out loud. It's different in that kind of an environment because there's so many more species of birds and there's so much more going on. So you would just have to find a certain little area and do your own experiment. I know you're smart enough to figure it out. Misha.
The next question is from the Rogers family. How far apart should birdhouses be, and how far should they be from feeders?
You should put birdhouses away from feeders. When birds are feeding young and incubating, they don't want to have all that feeding going on by other species outside their house. The whole idea of incubating and raising young, you want to make sure you're out of the way. You don't want to be near predators. You really don't even want anybody knowing where you're nesting or near your nest box. So it's best to put the nest boxes away. And we have all this information here in the store too. There's a lot of it out there. Morning sun, not afternoon sun. And then think about if you're a bird pair, you don't want to be competing with other species, like wrens. If you put two wren boxes too close together, they're not going to want to use it. So if you can put a wren box at the front of the house, you can put a wren box in the backyard, then it's like two different territories, just like the hummingbird feeders. So you want to give everybody enough space. And you might even have a few birdhouses up, and during a season, only a few of the birdhouses will be used. So I know at our house, we have 5 birdhouses up, and only 2 have been used so far. And so they may take turns and swap out. So you should really try to give them as much space so that they think when they come out their nest box, they're the only ones there. So even if it's around some shrubs or one fence under some cover compared to another, you have to do some creative thinking.
Larry says, a scrub jay chases all smaller birds out of my yard when it wants to eat and drink. Anything I can do to discourage this behavior and encourage it to get along with the others?
Bless your heart, Larry. You know, a corvid is a corvid, and jays, ravens, crows, that's what they do. That's just the way they're wired, and you can't do anything about it. In fact, a lot of people don't want to have jays in their yard. They take eggs, they take nestlings. It's tough. And so if you have a pair in your yard, some people will put out bird feeders that there's a cage around the feeder, and the cage is too small for the jays to get in, but the little birds can go in for food. And so you could try doing something like that, but there's really no way to keep, if a jay lives in your neighborhood, a pair, there's really nothing you can do to encourage it. You can't turn them into nice guys.
A Hecker fam asked, how do you monitor nest boxes safely so you don't harm possible nestlings?
Well, you know, I don't monitor nest boxes, like the monitoring people do. So all the nest boxes that we sell here, they have a clean out. You have the ability to open them up and clean them out, but that's usually done when there's no nesting going on. So you're not going to mess anybody up. If there's people monitoring nest boxes, like at the parks and the open spaces, those boxes have easy opening tops or backs. And so you just gently take them down, open, look, do your data entry, and put it back. Chris, who sent me the picture of the chickadees in her yard or their yard, they were able to obviously open it. Photographs, the pictures were throughout the sequence of the incubation. And so it depends on how you have to have a nest box that's easy access, and so you don't disturb them. Move them as little as possible, and just put it right back to where, the parents were, where the parents know them to be. And so you just have to be careful. We don't really encourage it, if you can prevent it. But if there's a need to look and check into something, you just be gentle and then just put it back.
Charlotte says, I don't have many trees or flat places in my yard to place a bird feeder. Are there any types that can securely attach to a window and survive our Bay Area winds?
We do have bird feeders that go to windows, and they have huge suction cups. They don't carry a lot of seed, but it's still a lot of fun. They just put a little bit of seed because of the weight. And so, it makes it fun for you. You just adhere it to the window, and, it depends where you live. If you live in a really windy spot, I can't speak for that. But they're huge suction cups that go on these feeders. And just put a little oil before you put it on the glass, and that would probably work really well.
Lisa asked, do you recommend that we put out nesting material? And if so, what kind?
So nesting material is a great offering. Hummingbirds love it when you put out nesting material for them. Some of the other birds will also grab it. It's usually cotton, no chemicals. You should never use dryer lint. People think that's a great idea, but you have no idea what chemicals were in the fabric and in the detergent, so you just don't want to do that. And whatever the fabric is, it may not handle weather correctly and rain and absorb and not evaporate, so you shouldn't use that stuff. But the stuff that you buy commercially, it's usually cotton or feathers or alpaca fur, chemical-free. You just hang it in your yard where the birds can find it, and then during the spring you'll see the hummingbirds coming and grabbing it, and some of the other birds come and grab it too. Hummingbirds are really good at using it.
Related to that, Shannon says, my neighbor puts yarn scraps out for birds to use as nesting material. Is that safe?
If you were going to put yarn out, I would think you'd have to have really tiny pieces. The whole point is you don't want it to get wrapped around their necks, wrapped around their legs, and they can't get out of it. Regular, cute, fuzzy nesting material isn't anything that the birds are going to get stuck in. And so even human hair, some people take the human hair out of their brush. If you've got really long hair and you put it out there and that nestling gets that hair wrapped around it, it could be a bad situation. So, you know, depending on how big the yarn is, that probably they'd have to be really small pieces and not made out of anything that can get wet and then bleed color-wise, or chemicals. If it's polyester or something, that's just not as recommended.
PM says, I have Oriole feeder nectar and jam, and I know they're in my area. Now with 2 streets from me. I saw them last year, but this year nothing. So what's going on? They said they use 6-inch fine yarn and cotton sold for pet birds.
So if it's hooded, I understood you to say hooded orioles. Hooded orioles weave their nests out of palm fiber. That's why they nest in palm trees. If he's talking about Bullock's orioles will use all sorts of weird things that they find, tarp scraps and the fake Easter grass. And so we don't often hear Bullock's orioles coming to people's yards. They tend to be more of a wild oriole, for lack of a better word. And so I don't know if you were noticing Bullock's orioles in your yard. Sometimes the orioles will really start to come to the feeders and jelly when they're feeding young. So they got here, they built their nest, they laid their eggs, they had to incubate, and then once they start feeding, all of a sudden you'll start to see them coming to your feeders. So if you've had them in your feeders in the past, maybe it just hasn't hit that time yet on the calendar where they're going to come back to you. And so, you know, it just all depends. You can't, orioles are not predictable. You can't always get them even though you know they're in the neighborhood.
All right, well, thank you so much. I think that was our last question for now. I will be sure to send everyone a follow-up email and let them know how they can get on your mailing list for Los Gatos Birdwatcher. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and thank you, Lisa, for your talk. Is there anything else you want to add?
I just want to thank everybody for fitting this in their day, and I hope you're all doing well, and I hope we all get to go back to a normal life real soon and enjoy the birds.